Well, good morning to Carl and Jessica and to Sharon and Cameron. A political battle of a different kind has been joined this week, and it'll be played out for many weeks to come, especially in Victoria and New South Wales, and maybe at the next federal election. The Bracks government in Victoria is now in caretaker mode. That is, the election is on. And all the polls, as is the case in New South Wales, concern themselves with the lower house. In other words, what's the standing of Steve Bracks? Can Ted Baillieu claw back the government's lead? And the same questions are being asked in New South Wales in relation to Peter Debnam vis-à-vis Maurice Yema. But arguably the biggest game in town in Victoria is what's happening in the upper house, because there are changes now at this election to the composition of the Victorian upper house. And whoever wins the balance of power there may well control critical legislation in the state of Victoria. For the first time, Victoria's new upper house will have 40 members, and they'll be representing 8 seats. Victoria's been divided up into 8 separate blocks. Each will have 5 upper house members elected to represent it. Now that means that any candidate who gets more than a bit over 16% of first preference votes will be elected to the upper house. That's what's known as a quota. Now you arrive at that figure by regarding the total votes available as 100%, take the total number of seats up for grabs, which is 5, add 1 for the purpose of the exercise, which makes it 6, divide that into the total number of votes, 100%, and you get 16.6%. That's a quota. Anyone getting that will be elected. That candidate's surplus votes are then distributed according to preferences. And that's going to bring the whole balance of power issue into a choice between Family First and the Greens. Now, there's talk that both Labor and Liberal are working behind the scenes to preference the Greens. Obviously, with one eye on the polls, they think in some way that might help them. Indeed, the Greens' national leader has gone so far as to threaten to direct preferences away from the Bracks government in key seats if Mr Bracks were to cut any deal with Family First. There's no doubt that that indicates that Family First is a viable force in this Victorian election, as it will be in New South Wales. But this is where big business is starting to take an interest. It's reported to be pressuring both the Labor Party and the Liberal Party not to strike preference deals with the Greens. A report earlier this week suggested senior business figures had expressed concern that they'd be held to ransom by the Greens if the party held the balance of power in the upper house after the Victorian election on November 25. One business leader was quoted as saying, "There are numerous heads of companies who have recognised that minority groups having balance of power could affect the way Victoria is governed." Well, that's an understatement if ever there was one. Well may business be worried about some of the Greens' policies, shorter working weeks without the loss of pay, closing of power stations, banning new dams, getting into bed with animal liberation groups. And on the social side, allegedly free heroin to addicts, shooting galleries, which we've already got in New South Wales, abolish criminal sanctions for drug users. People, not just business, have got to decide how far down those roads we go if the Greens have the balance of power. Family First have constantly argued that they want more jobs, higher wages, less red tape for business, teaching values in schools, deterring people from taking drugs. Already there's been a leaked email from Labor's Parliamentary Secretary for Infrastructure in Victoria, Carlo Carli, to Greens member Robert Humphries that Mr Carli did not, quote, believe that the ALP will ever preference Family First. And whether that's the Labor Party's position or not in Victoria, the electorate should know, and the electorate should be alert. The issue is simple. In the Victorian election of November 25 and the March election next year in New South Wales, the composition of the upper house is important. People have to ask themselves whether they want that controlled by the Greens or the Family First Party. And voters in particular ought to give very serious consideration as to where they put their preferences after they voted for either Labor, Liberal or National. It may not be an election between them. The upper house in Victoria will be critical. The real issue may be the contest between Family First and the Greens. It's too late after the event. Voters should be doing some homework now. I'm Alan Jones.